Welcome, sleepless spirit. I'm your storyteller tonight, here to guide you gently into the shadows of slumber, where dreams take over and worries fade away. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more bedtime tales, whispered just for you. Let me know in the comments, where in the world are you watching from, and what time is it as you listen tonight? And if there's a story you've been longing to hear, something spooky, something comforting, tell me. I'm always listening. Now, tuck yourself in. Let the darkness wrap around you like a warm blanket. It's time to let go and drift into the story. I never imagined that a straightforward sleepover would be the night that transformed my life. Friday nights were special to me as a child. Don't set any alarms for tomorrow. I don't have any looming homework deadlines, unadulterated freedom. The nicest part of that freedom was having sleepovers. Laughing until our tummies ached while eating enough junk food to kill a horse all night long. The nights felt infinite. Ethan Walsh was my best friend back then. By middle school, we were practically best friends after first meeting in 3rd grade. Everyone admired Ethan because he was one of those kids. He had all the newest video games before everyone else. His parents were easygoing, and his house was enormous. However, neither the games nor the snacks were the true treasure of his home. He had a basement. A child's paradise was that basement. A large, circular room with a pool table on one side, an air hockey table on the other, and a little laundry room with a hefty white door in the far corner. A tiny fridge, a bar, and 2 enormous couches facing a flat-screen TV were all present. It was like a second home to us, because we stayed down there so many nights. It began like all the previous November nights. It marked the beginning of a 3-day weekend, and after supper, my mother dropped me off. I can still feel the chill of the frigid air when I grabbed my overnight bag and got out of the car. The large windows of the Walsh house let in golden light that poured onto the driveway, making it glow warmly against the darkness. Before I could even ring the bell, Ethan threw open the door. He smiled, his hair standing up as if he had combed through it 100 times. "Dude, finally," he said. I rolled my eyes and yelled, "Tfic." Everyone was Tyler and Marcus, 2 other guys from our grade. "Your mom here?" "Yeah, she ordered pizza." "Come on, everyone's downstairs already," with controllers in hand and the TV blaring explosions and gunfire. They had already entered the basement. As I followed Ethan down the stairs, I could smell the scent of pizza and something sweet, like cookies. The noise was loud and the basement was warm. Bailey, Ethan's golden retriever, wagging her tail at me, and then curling up on the rug as the music hummed softly from a Bluetooth speaker. Hours passed in a haze of junk food, video games, and laughter. Marcus almost choked on a Dorito while laughing at Tyler's absurd tale of a teacher who got confined in the supply closet. We planned for the following day, maybe a movie after playing basketball in the park. It was one of those evenings when everything seemed so normal and secure. Nothing could possibly go wrong. In your opinion, Tyler was the first to crash at midnight. Claiming the couch nearest the television, he covered his head with a blanket. Not long behind, Marcus muttered that he was done for the night before turning over and snoring quietly. Ethan and I remained wired and seated as a result, controllers in hand, cross-legged on the carpet. Ethan's gaze darted to the distant corner, and he replied abruptly, "You ever notice? That laundry room appears eerie at night." I looked over. A sliver of darkness pierced the warm warmth of the basement lights as the laundry room door cracked open. I mumbled, "Thanks for that picture." He lowered his voice and whispered, "I'm serious. At night, I occasionally hear sounds coming from there, such as similar to scraping or hammering." My dad shrugged and said, "It's either the pipes or the dryer cooling down." I felt a slight chill. "Close it," I murmured, with a sly smile. Ethan stood up and pushed the door closed. It merely rested against the frame, rather than latching all the way. I kept staring at that door as we played for another 30 minutes. I thought it might have moved a little bit at one point. My chest constricted. I muttered, "Did you see that?" "What?" "The door. It shifted." Ethan stopped the game and squinted. The door remained motionless. He chuckled uneasily. "You're losing it." Eventually, we decided to crash and stopped playing games. Ethan took the other couch close to Tyler and Marcus, who were completely unconscious. The one next the washing room and by the bar was mine, a huge error. It was dark when I woke up. The kind that presses down on your eyelids and feels heavy. No TV glow. The windows in the basement were dark. I was confused for a few seconds and didn't know where I was. Then it returned with the scent of cold pizza and carpet cleaning. The sleepover, the basement, however, there was a problem. The air seemed different. It was stiller and colder. Then I sensed it. I muttered, "Ethan," as I felt a prickling feeling on the back of my neck, as if someone was watching me. The volume of my voice was too high. No response. I slowly sat up. There was no one on the other couch. I felt sick to my stomach. I heard it at that point. Click. There was a faint metallic sound coming from the laundry room, like the gentle closing of a dryer door. It made my skin crawl. I told myself I was being screwed by Ethan. A classic prank. All right. That game is playable by two people. My heart was thumping so fiercely that it hurt as I walked carefully over the carpet. The door to the laundry room was now ajar, slightly open to reveal a sliver of darkness. Grasping the knob, I mentally counted to 3 before yanking it open. "You got it," I shouted, slapping the light switch. The harsh yellow glow spilled over. The empty room. Empty. "Ethan," my voice broke, but there was no response. Then I noticed it. A face stared back at me through the round glass door of the dryer, tinted and blurry, but unmistakable. Not Ethan, a man with his knees pressed too. His chest, eyes wide and unblinking, wrapped inside the dryer like a hideous doll. He had a pallid face, a smile that didn't come from a reasonable person extended across his lips. I was unable to move for a heartbeat, unable to breathe. The man's lips then moved. It was only a murmur, muted by the glass. I shouted so loud that it ripped my throat, swung around, banged against the bar stool, and ran for the stairs. "Shh," I cried. I yelled, "Ethan, wake up," and proceeded 3 steps at a time, upstairs. The hallway lights flickered on. The doors opened. Ethan's parents made a mistake. Lost and confused, Ethan was there, too, coming from his bedroom. "What the hell is going on?" his father yelled. I pointed to the basement and gasped, "There's a man." Before anybody could respond, a blur flew out. "In the dryer." "There's a man in the dryer." Past us, out the front door, and through the living room. Ethan's mother let out a cry. In his slippers, his father chased after him, but there was no chance. The man disappeared into the darkness. The police arrived. The house, the yard, and the street were all searched. Nothing. I only knew that he was dressed in dark clothing. That's all. No distinct face. My recollection was etched with only those eyes. That night, I didn't get any sleep. Didn't go to sleep for a while. Deadbolts, cameras, everything was placed by Ethan's parents. There was never another sleepover. Not in his home. Nowhere. Even now, years later, I still think I hear it when I wake up in the dark. That quiet click of metal. Additionally, he always smiles as if he knows something I don't, as if it were not the first or last time he had done this. I recall that winter as if it were yesterday, December 2013, when the silence of the nights in our little Oregon town did you feel both exposed and safe, and the air outside seemed like glass fragments scratching against your skin. I was 12 years old, elderly, the youngest in a house that felt a lot quieter and larger than normal all of a sudden. For a week, my mom traveled to California to see an old college buddy, my older sister Sierra, who was 21 at the time. and my brother Mason, who was 19, were then left to supervise us. It was intended to be an enjoyable little diversion from daily life. We enjoyed a comfortable weekend organized by Sierra. Movies, junk food, maybe some baking, and no homework at all. That was the plan, anyway. Everything that transpired after that night feels like a terrible joke, since I can still imagine how normal it started. By late evening, we were all crammed into the living room. A warm warmth filled the room as the Christmas tree in the corner winked softly, adding to the enchanted appearance of the snow falling outside the window. While Mason entered in the front door with 2 big paper bags full of goodies, Sierra was snuggled up on the recliner, browsing through her phone. The cold and the sound of the door slamming shut caused his cheeks to flush. In the silence of winter, it sounded louder than normal. The victory goes to Little Caesars, placing a box of steaming pizza on the coffee table. Mason smiled. I also gave you guys Slurpees because it seems like I'm the greatest brother ever. Without raising her eyes from her screen, Sierra quipped, only when you're spending money. I was sitting cross-legged on the mat when I laughed. For me, what did you get? A blue raspberry. Mason threw me the cup and remarked, the one you always steal from me anyway. I grasped his hand and swatted it away, causing him to ruffle my hair. My 2 younger sisters, Chloe and Bella, stormed in from the kitchen with bowls of candy and popcorn. Bella, who was 8 years old, still had that naive sparkle in her eyes that I admired, while Chloe, who was 10, was already acting like she was 15. They sat down on the couch and argued about who should have gotten more gummy worms. We were prepared for the evening, a typical Saturday in December. Beautiful. Unless someone scored, you wouldn't really notice the background noise of the game on TV. I believe I initially became aware of it in the 3rd quarter. It was subtle, initially almost imperceptible. There was a faint scratching noise behind the walls. I recall cocking my head in an attempt to determine whether the only thing rubbing on the house's side was the wind. I said, "Do you guys hear that?" Sierra said without raising her head from her phone. "Hear what?" I remarked. "That scratching, like something in the garage." Mason scowled as he stopped eating a piece of pizza. Probably one of the cats. They sneak in there sometimes. Both cats are in the basement, Chloe replied. Mason raised an eyebrow when he said, "I just saw them. They're sleeping on the laundry pile." "Then it might be Rex or Luna," Bella whispered. "The dogs are in the basement too. By the furnace, they were lying." A chilly sensation settled in my abdomen. When Sierra did look up, her eyes flashed with annoyance. "Probably nothing. In cold weather, wood expands. There are sounds coming from houses." Don't worry too much, however. The noise persisted. It became, if anything, more intentional. Start from scratch. Hold on. Start from scratch. Start from scratch. Like a person carefully testing something by slowly running their nails across wood. Mason put down his plate and got to his feet. He said, "Okay, now that is weird." Sierra stood up as well. "Stay here. I'll check the garage. I'll accompany you." The words stuck in my throat, even though I wanted to tell them not to go. As they made their way toward the garage door down the short hallway, I sat motionless. Mason turned the light on, and then turned the knob. I didn't realize I was halfway behind them. The hardwood floor felt cold under my bare feet. Boxes and stored holiday decorations were covered in lengthy shadows when the garage light flickered to life. Still folded up and resting against the wall was the ladder leading to the attic area above the garage. Nothing didn't seem to belong. No sound, no movement. "See nothing," Sierra remarked following a Mason to steady breath, her voice solid as if she tried to persuade herself. "Yeah, must have been. I don't know, pipes or something," she said. The attic space over the garage was not large, but it was plenty to store old boxes and seasonal detritus, and as we turned back toward the living room, I thought I heard something overhead, a slight movement like weight on wood. Mason also halted, looking up. "Yeah," he muttered. "Stay here. You hear that?" I whispered. Before either of us could stop him, Mason unfolded the ladder and started to climb. Sierra grabbed his arm. "Are you insane? What if it is a raccoon?" Mason retaliated, saying, "It's better to know now than later." He vanished into the attic, his head and shoulders blending into the darkness above. For a little moment, I could only hear him shifting objects and his boots scuffing the wood. And then there was stillness. "I'm fine," he called quickly. "You good?" Sierra called, her voice shaky now. He paused, then his voice. "Yeah, just a bunch of boxes. Nothing." The sound abruptly stopped, not because he stopped talking, but rather because something slammed hard, making a noise like a heavy box toppling over. "I'm fine," he said. "I knocked something just now." That's when we all heard it. The sound of the garage door, our main door leading back to the kitchen, closing slowly, click, but Sierra was standing right next to me. "What the hell?" whispering. Sierra hurried back to the door and turned the knob, locking it. "Did you lock this, Mason?" "No." Mason's voice was muffled from above. "I'm still waiting." The garage light went out. It all happened at once. Sierra pulled me back as the scratching sound became louder again, directly above us. I swear I heard a low chuckle just a moment before Mason's voice exploded. "Get back, get." There was a huge thud, like a body striking the floor, followed by quiet. Sierra screamed, and the house went dark, with the TV in the living room turning off. Sierra grabbed my wrist, so hard it hurt, and pulled me toward them. "Basement, now go." The lights on the Christmas tree went out. The furnace stopped humming. We were thrown into a blackness, so dense it felt alive. Panic broke out. Chloe and Bella began sobbing from the living room. Sierra tried calling 911, but there was no signal. No Wi-Fi, nothing. We huddled in the first basement bedroom, pushing a dresser against a door, and then we heard it, slow footsteps above us. We staggered down the steps in the dark, our breaths ragged, the dogs barking wildly as if they sensed something we couldn't see. Luna and Rex were at the bottom of the stairs, teeth bared, their growls vibrating through the floor. "Ivy, Sierra, Chloe, Bella, Mason," he said our names, all of them, and then, quietly, as if he were leaning directly over the floor vent, he whispered. I brought candy canes, and Bella sobbed into our hands. The steps were heavy and deliberate, and each one made the floor creak in a way that felt like it was sinking into my bones. There was silence for a long moment, then the sound of the basement door opening above us, the hinges groaning like they were screaming, and then Sierra mouthed, "Don't make a sound." My heart was thumping so loudly that I was certain he could hear it. Dogs went crazy. I can't recall how long it lasted. Seconds seemed like hours. The man hammered on the door we had blocked, causing it to shake violently and the wood to shatter. "Let me in," he growled now, his voice no longer cheery. Sierra's face flared up with rage. "Don't make me hurt the little one," taking the metal pole from the splintered bed frame. She used it as a weapon. She whispered to me, "Run, don't look back. If he comes in." The pounding ceased. Like a trap, silence descended. Then the tiny basement window's glass broke. A hand unlocked the clasp by reaching through. Rex lunged, his teeth buried deep. Before Sierra could respond, Sierra used all of her strength to swing the rod down as the man let out a guttural animal scream. Bella and Chloe were dragged along as I hurried for the stairs. Blood spilled over Sierra's hands, and on the dresser was the last thing I noticed before running away. We were lucky, the officer said that had Mason not woken up at that moment and tackled the man from behind, it would have taken a different course. He was bleeding from the wound where Rex had ripped into his arm when they took him into custody in our kitchen. Daniel Cole was a 43-year-old man without a fixed address who had a history of assault, stalking, and breaking and entering. The length of time he had been planning was never discovered. However, They discovered food wrappers, blankets, and empty water bottles when they explored the attic. 4 days, he had been residing above us. Even at the age of 24, I still have trouble falling asleep without double-checking every lock. In 2020, we moved out of that residence. Chloe discovered something carved into the wall behind the antique china cabinet the day we returned for a last inspection. Deeply inscribed words in what appeared to be dried blood. "I'll be back." Daniel Cole received a 12-year sentence. 10 years have passed since then. I occasionally ponder whether he still remembers our names and whether he ever intends to fulfill his promise when the wind shakes my windows at night. The night is still etched in my memory like a scar that will never go away, no matter how many years go by. I was in the 5th grade at the time, 10 years old, and too old to be afraid of the dark. That's what I told myself, anyway. That weekend, my best friend Ethan was allowed to stay over since my parents trusted me sufficiently. He was one of those kids who, simply by being there, could make an ordinary night into something exciting. Since 1st grade, we had been best friends and had always pursued adventures, even ones that we probably shouldn't have. It had begun like any other Saturday. For us, my mother prepared pizza rolls. After playing a few video games, we stretched out on the couch and browsed Netflix in search of a scary film that didn't appear to be entirely false. It was a warm night with dim lighting in the house, where the deep shadows gave the impression that the room's edges were farther distant than they actually were. Ethan became disinterested halfway through a corny horror movie. He did. He was the kind of person who detested prolonged inactivity. With a playful twinkle in his eye, he turned to face me and said, "Dude, you know that old house, the one down near Millbrook Road?" I instantly felt my stomach turn. The Henderson house was well known to everyone in our neighborhood. Years of abandonment had caused it to rot into the ground like a forgotten corpse, perhaps. Rumors crawled out of it like bugs, and windows broke, peeling off like skin. It was rumored to be haunted. Others claimed that a deranged person resided there and hid from the police. When my older cousin rode by at night on his bike, he once claimed to have seen a candlelight in one of the upstairs windows. I answered slowly, "Yeah," already feeling guilty about it. Ethan smiled. Let's leave. I thought he was kidding, so I laughed and said, "Check it out, at 10 o'clock. "Are you insane?" "My mom will kill me. She's asleep," he replied. "Your father works nights. Nobody will be aware of it. The bikes will be ours. Return in about an hour." My entire body cried out. No, however, Ethan persisted. He was the type of friend who would make you feel weak if you gave in. He called me chicken for a few minutes before I gave in. In an attempt to avoid waking my mother, we stole out the back door. The chilly, biting air outside could have stung my nose. As we mounted our bikes, we exhaled in tiny white puffs. Only the distant buzz of traffic and the occasional dog bark broke the utter calm of the streets. About 2 miles away was Millbrook Road. It wouldn't have mattered in the sun. It felt like a trip into another universe at night, with only our inexpensive flashlights and the moon's faint brightness. The farther we travelled, until there were only shadowy fields on either side. There were fewer homes. With each bike stroke, my stomach roiled. Ethan muttered, "I'm almost there," as the Henderson house's silhouette emerged in the distance, squatting at the edge of the woods like a gigantic spider. We parked our bikes close to the cracked driveway's entrance. I pointed my flashlight at the house, and the beam trembled in my palm. Up close, the place appeared worse. The windows were sagging, and the roof ivy clung to the walls like veins, and the spaces between them gaped like empty eye sockets. I saw an old detached garage across the street. I could see what appeared to be tool-lined shelves inside, and its door hung crookily. Ethan remarked, "I say we hit the house first," and he started to move. I took a deep breath. "You're sure this is a good idea?" "Calm down. It's just an old house." He gave me a quick smile before pushing on the crooked front door. It moaned as if it were alive. The fragrance hit me as soon as that door opened. Like rotten eggs combined with something worse. It was thick and sour. A dead object. My gut churned. God, what is that? I pulled my hoodie over my nose and gagged. Ethan merely grinned and spoke in a hushed tone. Probably a raccoon or something. The air inside was heavier than outside, like it had been trapped 4 years. Our phone flashlights carved narrow tunnels of light through the darkness, bouncing off peeling wallpaper and broken furniture. Shadows clung to the corners like spiders. Creepy as hell, I muttered. You mean awesome? Ethan said, grinning like this was the greatest thing ever. The living room was the first stop, empty except for a tattered couch and a coffee table coated in dust. On the table sat a single piece of paper. I leaned closer, my flashlight shaking. The note read, "Be back soon. Get the sauce ready." Ethan, I muttered. Someone's been here recently. I froze, the ink fresh and gleaming in the light, my chest constricted as if someone had put a belt around it. Maybe some kids are playing around, he said, scowling but shrugging. But then came the sound. It came from outside, a hollow metallic thud, like something heavy striking a steel plate. My heart leapt into my throat. You heard that, right? Ethan paused before gently nodding in response to my hiss. Yes, most likely the wind. The wind. No wind was present. He tried to come across as bold when he said, "Let's just check the kitchen and leave." The kitchen rear was even worse. I didn't want to go further, but what was I going to do? Leave him here alone? Old food, mouldy bread, shriveled tomatoes, and a slab of meat on a plate littered the counters. I initially believed it to be steak. Then I saw the outline, too uneven for store-bought cuts, with jagged edges. Beneath it, thick, viscous blood pooled. My eyes swam. That's not meat, Ethan. A scream ripped through him before he could react. All through the night, it was external, a primal, piercing scream from a male. I saw him when we hurried to the window, hearts pounding. A man pulling a body across the ground while wearing a clown mask. The arms were limp, and the ground was stained by the dark track. It was authentic. I was having trouble breathing. Ethan mumbled, "Oh my God." His voice broke. The clown was on his way across the street to the garage. The lights turned on as he entered, casting an orange glow into the night. At that point, we were able to see what was within. They weren't only instruments, they were darkly discolored. Saws, cleavers, chains, and hooks. In the middle sat a metal table, and the clown began chopping the body up as if it were dinner meat. To stop myself from yelling, I covered my mouth with my palm. I had water-like legs. Ethan screamed, "We need to call someone," as he fumbled for his phone. We dialed 911 with shaking fingers, whispering into the receiver, praying the dispatcher could hear us. "Stay hidden," she advised. "Don't make any noise. Units are on their way." Desperate to find a place to hide, we fled upstairs. 4 rooms were present. In the hopes that we might be able to get out if it came to that, we went with the first, one with a window. It crawled like an hour per second. The voice then emerged, "Come on out, come on out. I've got a ton of toys for you." Slithering through the house, the clown's singing tone became closer and closer. Next, make a scratch, start from scratch, start from scratch. Our door was dragged across by something sharp. The knob turned and my flesh pricked. The window groaned loudly when Ethan pushed at it. It's too late. The door exploded. The clown sprang forward. I didn't consider it. I simply jumped through the window. It broke like ice all around me. My arm exploded with pain as I hit the ground, but panic overcame it. When I saw the flashing blue lights just up the road behind me, I scurried to my feet and ran. The sound of footsteps echoed. I took a chance and looked back. He was pursuing me, mask smiling in the dark, knife in hand. The air was broken by a gunshot. Clutching his leg, the clown fell, yelling, A second clown was hauled out of the house in handcuffs by another cop. Ethan staggered out after them, alive but as pallid as a ghost. As it happens, the Henderson residence was not haunted. It was worse. As members of a cult, the clowns lured individuals, killed them, and sold their parts on the underground market, human flesh, that steak on the counter. They were sentenced to life in prison. For my part, I never again approached an abandoned house. And I still hear that voice when I wake up certain nights, my heart pounding. Come on out, come on out. I've got a ton of toys for you. I can still clearly recall the night that completely altered my life. At the awkward age of 15, when weekends meant freedom, I was 15. There are no regulations, no parents, and most definitely no curfew. That's at least how it was in those days. Earlier in the week, I received a text from Liam, my best buddy since elementary school. All weekend, parents are out. Are you coming over on Friday night? There was little persuasion required. Liam's house was always the best for sleepovers. He lived on a quiet street, not far from the town's outskirts, in one of those ancient two-story houses. Almost entire of the basement was his, making it the ideal place to hang out within a worn-out couch, an outdated TV, and every kind of gaming system being cuffed. I was virtually counting down the seconds till I could arrive by Friday afternoon. My parents only advised me to stay safe and keep my phone on, without really asking any questions. I picked up my bike, packed some things in a backpack, and walked the 4 blocks to his house. The sun was sinking behind the houses, and the sky was turning that golden orange. A few neighbors were walking their dogs when I passed them. Somewhere, far away, there was the faint sound of children laughing. Everything seemed safe and typical. The house was just as it had always been when I arrived at Liam's. Without his parents present, the interior looked different, even if the porch light was on, and there were a few old lawn chairs outside. The air felt heavy and strangely empty. He gave me a fist bump and a smile as he met me at the back door. You made it, dude. Are you prepared for an amazing evening? Hell yeah, I replied as I entered. There was a slight fragrance of fabric softener and leftover pizza. Before going downstairs to the basement, we threw my belongings in his room upstairs. The night truly began at that point. Sodas were piled on the coffee table, controllers were entangled like vines, and junk food was all over the place. We performed every role: laughter, trash talk, Call of Duty, FIFA, and even some classic Mortal Kombat. The time passed quickly. We eventually stopped playing games and began watching a movie instead. I can't even recall which one it was. Some sort of superhero movie. I believe, like Falls, we decided that prank calls would be more entertaining, so we didn't finish it. For background, I had never in my life performed a prank call. The pro was Liam. He was constantly searching for the next joke to make him laugh. He went to work after bringing up a list of pizza joints on his phone, feigning to make an order for 50 anchovy pizzas or inquire about their sushi offerings. We were laughing so hard we were sobbing. It was then my time. I entered a random number because I had no plan. No answer on the first call. Voicemail comes in second. Third, an elderly woman who hung up right away. Just as I was ready to give up, the fourth number came through. Yes, that was it. No name, no hello, just yes, like someone who had smoked a pack a day for 30 years. The voice was deep and gruff. I was taken aback, and it wasn't made any easier by Liam's muted background chuckling. I made an effort to think of anything spontaneously. Oh, hello. If I were to borrow a wheel from your car, would that be okay? Beside me, Liam burst into laughter. I laughed too, but the man continued. Kid, what's your name? Yo, Bob. Not a word. Then I froze. You sure it's not Liam? My back felt as though freezing water had suddenly been dumped on it. I glanced at Liam slowly. He was pale now. What on earth? I muttered. How does he? Liam began, but I interrupted him. I ended the call. Who was that? My voice trembled as I asked. I'm not sure, Liam stumbled. Does your name appear on the caller ID on your phone? No, my dad's name is displayed. How did he know mine, though? For the first time, I felt like something was seriously amiss. We worked on his laptop for the next 20 minutes, attempting to determine whether his name could be derived from a phone number alone. No, unless you have access to a serious database, according to everything we read. Liam was 15 as well. He had no social media accounts or public records using his true name. It was illogical. He freaked out when I suggested that we call his father. He said, I'm not supposed to have anyone over. I'm in trouble if I phone him. We simply attempted to ignore it, switched the movie back on, and acted as though nothing was wrong. No, it wasn't. We heard something around an hour later, just as I was ready to forget about the call. An inappropriate sound. From upstairs came a gentle brook. Liam turned the television off. We gazed at one another. Then there was another noise. The storm door in front is opening. The switch to the main door began to rotate. Halfway through, it stopped. Someone was trying to enter, but the lock was secure. Liam's face lost its hue. He extinguished the lights, and we both huddled close together, gasping for air. I slithered over to the tiny window in the basement and slightly angled the blinds to get a glimpse of what was outside. A tall, broad-shouldered man stood on the porch. Even though it was cold outside, he had no jacket on. Slowly, he turned his head and met my gaze. I quickly lowered the blinds, causing them to slam against the glass. I felt my gut turn to knots. He saw me, I muttered. With a quivering voice, Liam questioned, What do we do? We heard the side gates creak before I could respond. Oh my God, I whispered. The backyard, with wide eyes, Liam said. The back door. Did you lock it? I can't recall. I sprinted in the direction of the kitchen steps. It felt like a tunnel along the hallway to the back door. I froze halfway through the journey. Behind the glass, a man's figure could be seen, motionless and observing. I could hear the pounding of my heart in my ears. I slowly retreated, hoping he hadn't noticed. The handle then turned, though. The door opened. He entered. Almost tripping myself, I ran back down the stairs, eyes wide. Liam waited at the bottom. I hissed and took hold of his arm, now upstairs. Silently and swiftly, we crept up to his room, closed the door, and got beneath the bed, dragging the dust ruffle down as we went. I thought my heart would explode from my chest. The sound of footsteps filled the house. Slow and methodical, all the doors opened, each hinge groped toward it. More volume, the steps came next. Liam's breathing was too loud, so I put my hand over his mouth. The door of the bedroom squeaked open, not a word. The door to the closet slid. The rod was scratched by hangers, the clothes rustled, steps, nearer the bed. They halted. We continued to wait. Then, as Liam was pulled from beneath the bed, a scream broke the stillness. His nails raked the ground as he kicked and clawed. Carpet. I sprang forward, snatched the drawer from the knitstand, and tore it open. I wrapped a tiny knife around my fingers. I didn't believe I had simply moved. I stabbed the man in the back with the blade. Run! I exclaimed as he bellowed and released Liam, who was spinning in my direction, cried out. We ran out the back door, down the stairs, and into the woods behind his house. As we sprinted, our hearts thumping like war drums, branches whipped our faces. It wasn't until we fell behind a dense bush that we stopped. Our strained breathing was all that was audible for a moment. Then there were heavy crunching leaves and footsteps approaching. We barely managed to dig ourselves into the ground, fearlessly taking a breath. A few feet away, the footsteps ceased. After that, they turned and went in a different direction. After waiting until we could no longer hear them, we ran back to the house and shut all the windows and doors. We phoned the cops this time, I noticed Liam standing at the tree iron, observing, when I switched on the backyard light while he was on the phone. Then he vanished into the shadows. We didn't see him again after that. No strange calls, no banging on windows, nothing. Nothing but quiet. 5 years have passed. I have no idea who he was or how he was aware of Liam's name. The call might have been the cause. It might have been something else, but I always wonder, when I think about that night, what if we weren't quick enough to hide? But what if I hadn't reached for that blade? Would we be here at all? I mistook it for a simple sleepover. Birthdays should be enjoyable, right? The kind of nights when you eat so much junk food that you feel ill, laugh until your cheeks hurt, and whisper secrets long after you should be asleep. I had that in mind when I organized my 13th birthday celebration. A straightforward get-together with a few companions, just us spending time together and creating memories, no elaborate staging or elaborate decor. In the midst of summer vacation in July 2013, I had been giddy with anticipation all day. Mom took us to Oakage, a city approximately 20 minutes away, for pizza and shopping earlier that afternoon. I was accompanied by my pals Rachel, Sophie, Amber, and Kelsey. Since 2nd grade, Sophie has been my best friend, almost my sister now, really. Even though they were close friends, the others had never stayed at my house before. I desired perfection. We arrived home shortly before nightfall, and I wanted them to think, wow, that was the best night ever, with the kitchen window open and the scent of smoky charcoal wafting through. My dad was grilling hamburgers in the backyard. My favorite cake, chocolate, was baked by Mom, who also allowed us to decorate it ourselves. By the time the sun set, illuminating the sky with pink and orange striations, we had eaten, laughed, and taken a dozen silly photos with Sophie's old flip phone. Everything was joyful and secure. Situated on the outskirts of a peaceful cul-de-sac, the house was a modest ranch with only one story. Large maple trees and vintage lampposts bordered our street, casting a soft yellow glow at night. It was home, even though it wasn't fancy. The living room was our kingdom tonight. The floor appeared to be one enormous cushion nest as we brought in cushions, blankets, and sleeping bags. The coffee table was strewn with candy wrappers, soda cans, and bags of chips. By the TV was a pile of DVDs. We were going to watch girl flicks till we were exhausted. 10 Things I Hate About You was the first film, followed by Clueless, then Mean Girls, at Sophie's request. It was beyond 1 a.m. when the third movie's credits rolled. Soft blue shadows were cast across the room by the TV's illumination, and an odd quiet had descended upon the room. You know, the kind where everything is so silent that every small sound seems louder. I stretched my arms above my head and said, "Okay, that's all there is to movies. I'm going to lose my sight." Rachel flopped onto her stomach and mocked, "Liar, if we let you, you'd run 5 more marathons." I smiled, but to be honest, I was exhausted. I wasn't expecting anyone to go to sleep just yet. 10% really slept on sleepovers, and 90% whispered in the dark. Sophie refused to be in total darkness, so we turned off the main lights, leaving only a tiny lamp burning in the corner. Then followed the standard jokes about gossip. Which dumb celebrity would play a movie game with you? The zombie apocalypse question was eventually proposed. Typical middle school bullshit. Who would survive if zombies attacked at this moment? Kelsey sat up like she was delivering a TED speak and said, "I would. I run track, so you guys would be screwed. Pardon, Emmy," Amber retorted, hurling a pillow in her direction. "Thank you very lot. I participate in gymnastics. I'm capable of backflipping over a zombie." Sophie gave a snort. "You'd die first because you tripped over your own pride." When that occurred, we were all laughing. Make a knock, one intentional, and angular rap against the large front window. Immediately, there was silence. Everybody's head snapped toward the sound as we froze. even though the TV had been off for 10 minutes. I briefly believed it might be the cause. However, a second sound, this one weaker, followed, a leisurely, finger-like dragging motion along glass. Amber's eyes were wide as she whispered, "What was that?" With a quick "probably nothing," Kelsey said, "like the limb of a tree or anything." Muttering, "There are no trees near that window," Sophie said. Even though my pulse was racing, I faked a laugh while trying to seem composed. "You guys, it's okay. When I have friends over, my dad likes to scare me because he finds it amusing." It seemed to calm them down a bit. Dad played practical jokes. He once spent 10 minutes hiding in my closet before bursting out and exclaiming, "Boo." His fingerprints were all over everything, right? Everyone was a little tense, but we resumed whispering. Bang, bang, came as I was in the middle of a stupid story when the glass was rocked by 2 loud knocks. Amber let out a scream. As if to shield herself, Rachel pulled her sleeping bag up. I'm fairly certain that Sophie's muttered something that wasn't PG. My voice cracking, I screamed toward the window, "Dad, really, stop it." There was a heavy, suffocating silence. No laughter, no running feet, and something cold crept up my spine. If it had been Dad, he would have said something by now. I stood with my legs shaking and slithered toward the window, where the thick, dark curtains were drawn, allowing a thin sliver of moonlight to peek through. It was a man standing inches from the glass, his face tilted up, catching the pale glow of the porch light, bald head, thin, barely their eyebrows. I reached out, my heart thumping so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest, and pulled the fabric back just enough to peek outside. I snatched the curtain down and staggered aside, gasping so hard that it ached. "It's not my dad," I blurted out. "It's some guy." His eyes were hazy and wide, as if he hadn't slept in days. His smile revealed a dark gap where a tooth should have been. That was all that was required. Chaos erupted in the room. "What?" "Call your parents," Sophie said. "Oh my God," Rachel exclaimed. "God, oh God, God, oh God." I ran for the stairs as Amber's voice trembled like a loose doorknob. Mom was at the window talking to someone outside when I burst in, saying, "There's a guy." I gasped. "I know," she said sharply, holding up a hand to stop me. Her voice was calm but tight, like a rope pulled too hard, and I froze, my socks almost tripping. My parents' bedroom door was ajar. I listened with my chest heaving as the man asked in a strange, almost singing voice, "Have you seen him? Have you seen Paul? Where's Paul? Is he here?" Paul was the name. He simply repeated it again and over. "Where's Paul? Where is he?" "He was here. I know he was here." Mom's tone hardened. "Anyone named Paul, you need to leave now," she replied calmly. Mom locked the doors. Dad picked up the phone and dialed the non-emergency police line, and they said they'd send a car to cruise the neighborhood. I went back downstairs to calm my friends, but their fear hung in the air. "You're frightening my children." He didn't respond immediately, instead standing there shifting his weight from one foot to the other as if he couldn't stay still. And then he turned and wandered down the driveway, vanishing into the shadows. I thought it was over, but it wasn't, because 20 minutes later, Mom decided to take the car and circle the block just to make sure he was gone. The street was eerily quiet, with those old lampposts barely lighting the cracked pavement. We tried to act normal, turning on another movie for background noise, but every creak of the house made us flinch. Halfway around the block, she noticed movement, a figure darting across the street. Mom pressed the brake so hard the tire screeched. Her heart lurched into her throat, and before she could say anything, the same man stepped into her headlights, smiled, and jumped in front of the car. She slowed, believing it was a child. I can still see his face when I close my eyes, that missing tooth, those sleepless eyes, and I wonder what would have happened if I'd opened the window, or if he'd found Paul. At 16, I never imagined that a simple sleepover would leave scars that I still feel today. The police still hadn't arrived by the time she got home, trembling. We never saw him again. They said he was probably drunk, high, or just lost. Back then, fear meant forgetting. A homework assignment, or being late to first period. Real fear, bone deep, paralyzing fear, was something I only knew from scary movies. And that night, we thought watching those movies would just be a harmless way to kill time. Life felt safe, predictable, full of school, friends, laughter, crushes, and the excitement of being just old enough to feel grown, but still wrapped in the innocence of childhood. My two best friends, Emily and Sophie, were the stick-together kind of girls, the ones who sat in the corner at dances and whispered jokes until our stomachs hurt from laughing. Emily had the ideal setup. It was the first Friday after midterms, and everyone at school had been talking about parties, weekend trips, and anything to relieve stress. I wasn't the party type. It would just be us and her 9-year-old little sister, Hannah, sleepover at my place. Emily had asked earlier that day, tossing her hair back like it was the most obvious thing in the house, as she sat on the edge of a quiet wooded neighborhood about 10 minutes from our high school. Her dad owned some tech company, so the place looked like it belonged in a magazine, with wide glass windows, modern everything, and a backyard with a pool that glowed at night. The entire world, I smiled. As Sophie pulled out her phone, she added, "You know it, duh, scary movies and junk food." Emily rolled her eyes and said, "I'll bring the good snacks. None of that low-fat crap your mom keeps. You can consume as much actual sugar as you like, because she won't even be present." We chuckled without realizing the seriousness of what was said. By 8 o'clock, we were stretched out on Emily's enormous sectional couch, surrounded by a stronghold of blankets. Hannah had demanded that we paint her nails pink, and an hour before, she had fallen asleep. The house alarm went off while we were in the middle of our second scary movie, which was one of those classic slashers. The comfortable bubble we had created was disturbed by the screaming metallic wail. Emily silenced the television with a moan. "Oh no, it's a dumb thing. It occasionally does this. Something like a deer, probably." Sophie sat up, staring. "Your alarm was triggered by deer." Emily shrugged and padded barefoot to the wall-mounted panel on the polished wooden floor. "I'm not sure. It's really sensitive, according to Mom." I drew my blanket closer to me. "What is sensitive?" whined. Emily silenced the alarm by entering the code. The issue was resolved there, but I was uneasy about the sound for some reason. The sound of the alarm was not a soft beep. It was a full-fledged scream of someone breaking in. We made an effort to ignore it and resume watching the film, but my ears continued to pick up on every noise in the house and every rustle outside. The alarm screamed once more 10 minutes later. We all three leapt. My heart struck my ribs with such force that it was painful. With a muttered groan, Emily stormed back to the panel. "All right, what the devil?" She gazed at the display. "It states that there was motion outside the pool entrance." Sophie caught my eye. She gave me a look. We were silent for a while. Sophie muttered at last, "It might be a raccoon." Emily gave a head shake. "The number. It is meant to disregard animals. It was calibrated for a human size solely by my dad." The words sank into my gut like ice. Emily made an effort to chuckle without opening her eyes. "Everything is all right. Most likely a bug. I'll reset it." But the uneasiness persisted as Emily tinkered with the then. I sneaked up to the balcony that looked out onto the backyard. From there, you could see the garden, the pool, and the shadowy area of forest that lay outside the house, and the night was quiet. Nevertheless, the pool lights reflected off the water like a sheet of glass, casting an unsettling glow. Click. After that, the floodlights by the swimming pool came on. My heart stopped beating. They were motion-activated lights. There was a movement down there. I backed away from the railing and shouted out, "Guys," my voice cracking, "Guys." The lights just I started to say, but the alarm went off again before I could finish. Sophie was right behind Emily as she ran up. "All right, that's it." Emily tried to seem brave as she said, "We're shutting down the entire system." However, the glimmer of fear in her eyes was visible to me. We congregated in the downstairs kitchen, turning off the lights in every room. Why none of us thought to pick up our phones is beyond me. Perhaps panic does that. It jumbles reasoning. We sat in silence for a long time, each nerve being taut. Then thud, a strong blow struck the entrance door. Hannah buried her face in Emily's sweater and whimpered. Emily walked her sister over to the alarm panel and whispered, "Stay here," her voice trembling. Sophie and I were left in the kitchen by ourselves, gazing at the glass back door with the shades partially open. We heard it at that point, steps, crunching against the gravel just outside, slow, purposeful. My arm was punctured by Sophie's nails. I was having trouble breathing. Just outside the door, the footsteps ceased. There was a shadow on the blinds. Then our faces were flashed with a dazzling, blinding light. I went cold. Sophie stopped. We didn't yell. We were unable to. There was a person standing there observing us. Before sweeping away, the ray lingered, almost taunting. Then the front door crashed again. Two of them. Two were present. I slithered over to the door. My instincts didn't am aware that I had kicked in. I clutched the handle as if my life depended on it and yanked the shades closed. Since it did, the handle was jiggled by the man outside, then hammered the glass till it shook, for what may have been minutes but felt like hours. As they went around the home, they tried windows, slammed doors, and muttered to themselves that they were laughing. I swear I heard excited, low whispers as if they were taking pleasure in this. Then it stopped just as abruptly as it had begun. There was silence, no voices, no footsteps. It wasn't until daylight that we moved. We rushed to tell Emily's mother everything when she got home. By then, it didn't matter that she was upset that we hadn't called the police. When the police arrived and inspected the property, they discovered large footprints scattered around the residence. The doors have marks, like someone's had given them a kick, the officer added. Probably just a couple of guys casing houses. Out here, they do it frequently. However, I understand how I felt. They had no intention of stealing. They want entry. Emily's residence was the last place I ever slept. I woke up perspiring 4 weeks, expecting to see that beam of light on my face or hear glass break. Emily believed that I was exaggerating. Nothing happened, she said. However, something did occur, because I now realize that the killer leaping out isn't the most terrifying aspect of a horror film. It's the silence, the waiting, and the knowledge that someone is there and wants you. It was nearly 15 years before I gave that night any thought. Not once. It was interred. It seemed to belong to another era, deep within the dusty attic of my early years. Like a dream, quite remember, but a certain you had. And then everything came rushing back to me last week, while my girlfriend and I sat on the couch. He had asked me a straightforward question. "How does your cousin behave?" I don't actually know her, but you brought her up. It appeared to be as simple. Then I tried to sum her up in a few words. "She's smart," I said first. "She's kind of shy with strangers, and I don't know, sometimes a little paranoid, I guess." I laughed and told him a few amusing stories about the two of us when we were kids, like the time we tried to make a haunted house in her garage using old sheets and flashlights, or the summer we became obsessed with Goosebumps books and read them aloud under a blanket fort. That's when I realized why I had thought that way. Suddenly, I was 10 years old again, standing on a cracked sidewalk in the last of the summer light, holding a plastic bag full of sweets, while my cousin whispered, "Don't look now." But that man is following us. It was as if someone had yanked the cord on a projector in my head. It was one of those never-ending summers when I turned 10. The days were long and filled with the sound of cicadas and sprinklers, and the air was thick with heat and opportunity. My cousin Hannah was 12, which made her feel so much older, as if she belonged to that afternoon. My mom dropped me off for a sleepover, and I jumped out of the car with my overnight bag and a stack of Goosebumps books I had just finished reading. Hannah was waiting for me on the porch, barefoot in jong shorts and a faded t-shirt with a picture of a woman. She lived in a quiet neighborhood called Brookhaven, right on the edge of town. It wasn't a place with sidewalks full of kids on bikes or families out barbecuing. It was quieter, almost a quiet, the kind of place where you always noticed when someone didn't belong. I assume you packed books, black cat on it. Before I had even said, hello, she questioned, you haven't read that one yet? Her eyes brightened, and I smiled, holding them out like a prize. Yes, we can read that one tonight after the movie, she added. Hannah had a stereo with a built-in cassette player, so she played an old tape of the three investigators. The narrator's voice was calm and crackly, and the sound of mystery layered over the hum of the fan in the corner transported me back to that room, complete with the faded purple carpet, posters on her wall, and the subtle scent of her mom's perfume wafting from the hallway. We spent the first hour sprawled on her bedroom floor, trading books and discussing which ones were the scariest. Around 6, her mom, my Aunt Rachel, prodded her, head in. She held out a $10 bill and said, if you two want snacks for your movie, better go now before it gets dark, and then split it, all right? As soon as her mother left, I murmured, $10 to us. That was a fortune. What should we get? Candy, of course. We left the house a few minutes later, the bill in Hannah's pocket, the sun still high but beginning to slide toward the horizon. Brookhaven was a quiet residential area, but only 10 minutes away was a large intersection lined with stores, chain supermarkets, a dollar store, and a department store that always looked half empty, Hannah said, and chips and maybe soda, if it's not too expensive. She had a way of making every little plan feel like an adventure. The supermarket was almost empty when we arrived, and we spent far too much time in the candy aisle comparing prices and stretching our budget as far as possible. You drove. The roads were wide and exposed, with small patches of weed growing through cracks in the pavement. We talked the entire way, debating which candy was better, chocolate bars or sour gummies. The heat was still sticking to the asphalt, making everything shimmer. We were so proud of ourselves for making it work. We bought 2 candy bars, a bag of chips, and a 20-ounce bottle of orange soda. After paying and putting the change in Hannah's pocket, we went back outside into the dusk light when everything changed. Don't look now, Hannah said sharply, and I froze in my tracks. You think he's following us? I laughed nervously. What, yellow shirt? He was in the store. He's been staring at us. I started to turn my head out of instinct, but her fingers clamped around my arm. Don't, she hissed. Just walk normally. We walked. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, that people often leave stores around the same time. But then I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, steady, matching ours. Every time the traffic decreased, the sound got louder. Why would he do that? I don't know, she answered, and her voice trembled on the last word. As we went by, I took the chance to look at the reflection in a store window, and there he was, a tall man, perhaps in his 30s, dressed in jeans and a bright yellow t-shirt, with no bags in his hands and empty hands. See, Hannah whispered, to herself, he has no groceries. He didn't buy anything. She shot back, come on, walk faster. My stomach nodded. Maybe he's going to another store. Then why is he on this side of the road? We sped up, and he did too. The main road gave way to Brookhaven's quieter streets. Every sound seemed louder, the crunch of gravel beneath our sneakers, the distant bark of a dog, the steady beat of footfall behind us, and Hannah's breathing quickened. There were fewer cars and people, and the shadows became darker. Don't go straight home. What do we do if he finds out where we live? She murmured. Turn left up here toward the park, I said, panic swelling in my throat. We turned, and he did too. Even I saw then that it wasn't a coincidence. Hannah took hold of my wrist and squeezed. I didn't even pause to pick up the soda bottle that slipped from my sweaty hand and clattered onto the pavement. And I heard the man's footsteps behind us, quicker, not running, but walking faster, as if he knew we wouldn't get very far, and we ran until my lungs burned. We ran through the side streets, cutting corners, trying to lose Hannah, yanked me toward a row of hedges, and we huddled behind them, gasping for air, trying not to make a sound, and for what seemed like an eternity, we listened to nothing. Then, at the end of the block, I saw him again, his yellow shirt glowing in the dim light like a warning sign. Come on. Then there were slow, deliberate footsteps on the other side of the hedge. Before I could gasp, Hannah's hand clamped over my mouth, and we remained frozen in that position until the sound subsided. When we eventually returned to her street, it was completely dark, and her porch light was on. With our hearts racing, we ran the final block and slammed the door behind us. Aunt Rachel jumped up from the couch and said, "What on earth, girls, what happened?" Hannah spoke to hastily and trembled. "Nothing," adding, "We just ran, because it was getting dark." Neither she nor I told her. We didn't read Goosebumps or even watch the movie that night. Instead, we just sat on her bed and kept the bag of candy unopened between us. Hannah eventually muttered, "He knows where I live now." Hours later, long after the house had become silent, I got up to get some water. I wanted to tell her it wasn't true, that he was just some random person, but the words wouldn't come. I froze as I walked past her bedroom window and noticed a figure in a yellow shirt standing outside in the dim light of a street lamp, facing the house. I blinked, and he was gone, or perhaps he had never been there. I'm not sure, and I've never mentioned that to anyone, not even Hannah. The man in the yellow shirt. How closely he followed, how quiet the neighborhood was, how empty the streets were, and how easily he could have left are all things that come to mind now, even though we never talked about that night again. When I was 8 years old, everything seemed simple. My mom had recently separated from my dad, and money was tighter than ever. She found this little old house on the outskirts of town. It wasn't much, if perhaps he stood there in the dark for a moment, watching the house, memorizing it. And I wonder what would have happened if Hannah hadn't noticed him first. The house had one redeeming feature, the backyard, which was enormous and far larger than anything I had ever had before. The house had peeling paint, uneven floors, and doors that never quite closed correctly, but it was ours. My mom called it a fresh start, and my sister and I called it the shack, though not to her face. It also had a wooden deck that creaked when you ran across it, and an above-ground pool, which was heaven for 2 kids. The yard was surrounded by a tall wooden privacy fence that made it feel like our own private world, isolated from the outside world. My sister, Kayla, was 12 years old at the time and 4 years older than me, so she believed she knew everything. I was a nosy kid, as Kayla liked to say, and the first thing I did when we moved in was explore every inch of that backyard. Then we shared a tiny bedroom, with bunk beds jammed against one wall and a single dresser against the other. There was hardly any space to walk, but Kayla didn't care because she always got the top bunk. It was tall, but some of the boards were loose enough that you could peek into the neighbors' yards if you climbed on them. That's how I met the boys next door, Dylan and Luke, who lived in a bigger, nicer house kitty corner from us and attended my school, though Luke was 2 grades below Kayla and a grade ahead of me. They were friendly enough, and soon it became a habit. We met Randy, their uncle, who was in his late 20s or early 30s, though at the time I couldn't have guessed an adult's age to save my life, and who was always around doing yard work or fixing something in their driveway. I would climb onto the loose plank, peer over, and talk to them while Kayla hung out behind me, acting like she was to call for it, even though she always stayed to listen. He was one of those guys who seemed normal, friendly even. In retrospect, there were things I should have noticed, like how he never really talked to anyone his own age, were how he always seemed to be out there when we were. He would joke with us, ask about school, and tell us stories about when he was our age. Once, he accidentally threw a basketball over the fence, and when we offered to get it for him, he waved us away, and it was Kayla who made the mistake. One afternoon, as the sun was lowering, and we were leaning on the fence as usual, she mentioned that Mom worked nights sometimes. I didn't think much of it. At the time, it didn't feel like anything, but now I wonder if he was testing something. I remember thinking how easy it looked for him. That must get lonely. Randy simply nodded. I don't know what time it was, but it was late enough that the crickets were loud, the way they get in the summer. Kayla shrugged, and we continued talking about school. Nothing seemed different until the night everything changed. Mom was at work, and the house was quiet except for the hum of the old box fan in our bedroom. My heart began to race, and I thought I might be dreaming, but then I heard it again, more clearly this time, a man's voice outside our window. I was asleep when I woke up to a sound I didn't recognize, a low voice, followed by a soft, uneven tapping. Kayla. Hey, Kayla, open up. Kayla was already out of her bunk, her feet striking the floor, and she put her finger to her lips when she saw me. Her eyes were wide and glistening with tears, and she had the phone in her hand, whispering into it with a trembling voice. Yes, 911. I sat up in bed, my chest tight. Someone is outside my window, please. The tapping became pounding, as the voice outside grew louder and more irate. Kayla, open the damn window. All I want to do is talk. I recognized Randy at that moment. He walked around the house, his fists pounding on the siding and his footsteps crunching on the gravel outside. I wanted to cry, but I held onto her arm and tried to make myself small. Doors shook, windows shook, and he kept calling for her, his voice rising, slurred with something I didn't understand at the time, but now know was rage, or maybe something worse. Kayla locked our bedroom door and squatted next to me on the bottom bunk, still whispering into the phone. He kept banging, and by the time the police arrived, he was gone. He had only to leap that fence, of course. When the police came on his home, he denied everything, and they claimed they couldn't do anything without evidence. Mom was incensed. Things were quiet for a while because she began sleeping at our grandfather's house when she worked nights. Years went by. I stopped talking to the boys next door, and Randy became a name we didn't mention aloud. I thought we were safe, but I was mistaken, and the second time was worse. I was in my room half asleep when I heard a scream, and when I ran out, I saw all of them huddled together on the couch, pale as ghosts. Kayla was 15 by that time, and she had a few friends over for a sleepover. It was summer again, sticky and hot, and they were all piled in the living room playing board games and eating junk food. Kayla's friend gestured toward the sliding glass door as I asked, "Right there, he is." When I glanced, I saw a face pressed against the glass, staring at Randy. The blinds were mainly covered, but one had been broken for weeks, so there was a small opening. For a moment, nothing moved, and then everything burst, and someone picked up the phone. The last straw was when someone else pulled the blind shut, but it was too late. We all saw Randy, and when the police arrived, he was gone again, jumping the fence and disappearing into the night. We moved out within a month, and Mom was given a restraining order. Randy didn't even bother to show there, so the judge allowed it. We didn't see him again until years later, when I looked him up online. It turns out that Ree is currently in prison, but not for us, but for something worse. And the scariest part is that sometimes late at night, I think about that a lot. I still remember that night as if it were burned into the back of my mind, the kind of memory that creeps out when the room goes quiet and you're alone with your thoughts. I was 12 and in the 6th grade at the time, old enough to feel like you know everything but still young enough to be completely naive. I wonder what would have happened if Kayla hadn't called 911 that first night, if the sliding door's lock had broken, if we hadn't moved when we did, with 3 best friends, Rachel, Maya, and Sophie, we were inseparable. We were the type of friends who made up stories about growing up together, attending the same high school, and marrying best friends so that we could all live on the same street. Sleepovers were a regular occurrence, with one of us hosting every other weekend as scheduled, and the others packing their duffel bags with snacks, pajamas, and the newest teen magazines. This time, the sleepover was at Rachel's house, with the coolest house of all of us, not because it was big, which it wasn't, but because her family was fun, including an older brother and 2 older sisters, who, unlike most siblings, didn't act irritated by us. Her sisters were in high school, and we thought they were goddesses with their lip gloss and loud music. Our parents all knew each other well, so nobody worried much about safety. To be honest, I thought bad things only happened to people on the news back then. The plan for that Friday night was straightforward: movies, snacks, late night gossip, and probably a few prank calls if we got bored. However, this weekend was different because Rachel mentioned very casually that her cousins were staying over too. Her brother was 16 years old, quiet, but pleasant enough. The sleepover began normally enough, with Maya and Sophie already sprawled across Rachel's bed, laughing about some stupid inside joke I'd missed, and the air smelling of buttered popcorn and fabric softener. Much of it, when she said it, family, visiting, no big deal, she said. But that detail, their presence, ended up changing everything. Our tiny sanctuary was Rachel's room, complete with glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling, boy band posters on the walls, and a knit stand piled high with friendship bracelets and nail polish. What did I miss? Nothing. Maya smirked. Just Sophie acting like a dying fish and trying to do the worm. Stop talking. After speaking to her mother, Rachel poked her head back into the room and said, "All right, so my cousins are here, just so you know." Sophie threw a pillow at her, and we all burst out laughing. It felt wonderful, safe. I wish I'd hung on to that feeling longer. Unthinking, I rummaged through my luggage for pajamas and said, "Cool, yeah, they're in the den with my brother," Rachel said, pausing as if she wanted to say more than simply shrugging. "We'll just stay in my room if they bother us. Are they our age?" Rachel shook her head when Sophie inquired. "The number 1 is a female, maybe 14. Rachel made a face and Maya taunted, "You number, trust me, he's weird." I remember her saying that quietly, as if she didn't want to explain. "The other guy's older. He's like 17. Older guy." Huh. I should have asked more questions, but we just laughed and went on, watching a movie and eating way too many gummy bears. For a while, everything seemed normal, until I used the restroom for the first time at around 10 p.m. Rachel's house wasn't very big, but the layout, her room was the den where the cousins were staying, was on the opposite side of the house, so I didn't expect to see anyone. But when I opened the door, I saw someone sitting in the dark. I froze, my hand on the light switch, because I thought I was dreaming, but it turned out that there was someone sitting on the closed toilet, knees apart, hands hanging loose, head tilted just a little, staring at the floor, and the light clicked on and he looked up at me. "Sorry," I blurted, closing the door so quickly it rattled, and standing there in the hallway with my heart thumping like a drum. He was a thin, almost frail-looking boy with stringy, dirty blonde hair, pale skin, and sharp cheekbones. Something about him made my stomach turn. He stepped out calmly, as if nothing had happened, saying, "You can go in now," in a soft voice, but there was something strange about it. "Thanks," I muttered, trying to sound casual, before I could decide whether to run back to Rachel's room or just act like nothing had happened. I should have left, but instead I went inside and locked the door, my hands shaking so much that I could hardly turn the lock. As I brushed my teeth, I kept asking myself, why was he in there? Why did he leave the door unlocked? Why hadn't he switched the light on? He was still there when I opened the door once more. The hallway seemed to go on forever. "Let me walk you back," he said. Before I could answer, He took hold of my hand. His skin was warm and slippery with perspiration. I didn't say anything, just walked, my heart thumping so hard I thought it would crack my ribs. He released his hold when we arrived at Rachel's room. Good night. He left after saying that slow smile once more. I stood there for a moment, my legs trembling, and then I slipped back into the room. Why do you look like that? Sophie inquired right away. I spoke quietly to them about everything, and Rachel's face turned white. I told you, she murmured. He's weird. What do you mean? Odd. Rachel paused before saying, he's just off. Oppressed. He has been attempting to spend more time with me than with my brother ever since they arrived. He enters my room and occasionally touches my hair. I detest it. Does it touch your hair? Disgusted, Sophie repeated. Rachel hugged her knees and nodded. He gives me this angry look when I step away, but then he smiles. It's unsettling. After that, we all fell silent. A tight clench of uneasiness in my gut had taken the place of the previous laughter. However, we made an effort to ignore it and pretend that nothing was wrong. No, it wasn't. During sleepovers, we were not permitted to lock doors. We tried to sleep by piling blankets on the floor because Rachel's mother was severe about that. The nightlight's illumination gave everything a gentler, safer appearance. Before I felt someone shaking me, I believe I had been asleep for about an hour. Rachel was the one. Her face was pallid and her eyes were big. She whispered twice as he opened the door. My skin crawled as I sat up. What are you saying? He did nothing except observe. Her voice broke. I had no time to even think about it. Until the door slowly opened once more. There was only a shadow. Moving into the room, no brook, no footfall. We stopped. I could see the outline of his head peeking through the doorway, but the moon was the sole source of light. He merely gazed without moving or saying anything. My chest hurt from holding my air so tightly. Then, almost like a breath, there was soft laughter. Whispering, "Hey, Rachel," he said. The door shut. Rachel's fingernails dug into my flesh as she gripped my arm tightly. For what seemed like hours, neither of us moved. He never returned. However, we also didn't sleep again. I didn't know what it was, but I felt like I'd survived something when the light finally rose. I assumed it would cease when my mother picked me up early. It wasn't because everything I believed to be true about feeling protected was altered by that night. I remained silent when my mother picked me up that morning. We didn't. We simply exchanged these tense, awkward glances as though we would make it true if we talked about it. In actuality, though, it was already genuine. I couldn't get rid of it for the remainder of the day. He seemed to have endless time, as evidenced by the sound of his whisper and the gradual opening of the door. I jumped at every creak in my own home. I barely slept through the night with the light on in my bedroom. Rachel gave me a call 2 days later. She spoke in a shaky, flat voice. "Have you told your mother?" she inquired. "No," I replied. "Why?" After a long period of silence, she finally murmured, "Don't." There was something about the way she said it that made my stomach turn. "Rachel, what happened?" There was another pause, and this time it was so quiet I nearly missed it. "They remain here." I held onto the phone like it was my lifeline as I sat there. "Are you saying that it's still there?" Their parents required a few more days, according to my mom, but they were scheduled to go on Sunday. Her breath is held tight by him. At night, he keeps entering my room. He just stares while seated on the floor. He was by my bed when I woke up. My heart stopped beating. "Have you told your mother?" "She doesn't think I'm real. He's just trying to bond," she added. I was at a loss for words. We were 12 when I wanted to tell her to contact the police. 12-year-olds don't report relatives to the police. I had trouble sleeping after that night. Every sound reminded me of that whisper in the dark, that slow smile. Rachel stopped attending school 3 days later. Maya claimed to have seen her once, via the car window in the pickup line, her eyes swollen as if she had been crying 4 days, despite her mother telling everyone she was ill. Then their cousins abruptly departed. No justification. The following week, Rachel returned to school, quieter than I had ever seen her. Despite our repeated requests, she refused to discuss what had happened. We eventually stopped inquiring. We were no longer truly friends by the 8th grade. Halfway through the school year, she changed schools, and that was that. However, occasionally, late at night, while browsing Facebook, I'll come across her name, a random post. My stomach turns every time because all I can consider that evening, the silhouette in the doorway, the murmur in the darkness, and the question of what else might have happened after I departed. I didn't tell my mother. We didn't, however. I still give it some thought. And each time I do, his expression when he took my hand in that corridor comes back to me. That slow smile, as if he already understood something I didn't. He would return. I can still hear the gentle, almost calming sound of the wind that night, as if it were lulling the entire town into a delusion of security. When I was 12 years old, I think I would have said that failing a math test or getting out of a baseball practice was the scariest thing in life. I didn't realize terror could be like a living monster, gnawing at your flesh and eroding you from the inside out until you're unable to think clearly. Everything changed that night. It began so naturally that sometimes, when I play it back to myself, I want to yell at my younger self for how secure, naive, and amused I felt. Prior to things going bad, 6 months prior, my parents had separated. It wasn't as sloppy as it looked on TV. It was nonetheless ugly in a subdued sense, even if there were no yelling bouts in front of me or broken plates. Dad left home to keep us afloat. Mom began working double shifts at the urgent care center. Our former home, complete with a large backyard and a tree we used to scale, turned into a mere recollection. In a neighborhood that appeared safe on the surface, but had a sense of isolation, we moved into a smaller two-story house. It was as if everyone there was acting as though their lives were flawless when they weren't. Mom tried her best to create a homey atmosphere. Even when her eyes were heavy with fatigue, she always asked about school, hung up family photos, and prepared my favorite foods when she had time. I missed my dad, but I tried to be strong for her. The way things used to be was something I missed. I was really looking forward to that weekend because of this. It was the first sleepover following the divorce, and my best friend Ryan was coming over. He was the type of buddy who could make you laugh even when things seemed hopeless, and who could help you forget your troubles. Everything was planned. Video games, movies, pizza, and staying up as late as possible without my mother going crazy, to children being children in a world where nothing really terrible could occur. Or so I believed. Around 5 o'clock, Ryan arrived, stomping snow off his boots as if he were trying to kill it. With a silly smile on his face and a bag that seemed on the verge of blowing up, he burst in the door. He shook his hair like a wet dog and muttered, "Dude, there is an absolute blizzard outside." I took his coat and chuckled as my mother said, "You better text me when you get there like I'm trekking through the Arctic. What a mama's boy you are." In any case, with a smile, he opened his luggage. However, I got the goods. It contained a Game Boy Advance with a link cable, 2 bags of chips, and a family-sized pack of Oreos. I told you were a legend. I know, don't I? At that moment, Mom emerged from the kitchen, using a dish towel to wipe her hands. She had that gentle grin she reserved for when I hosted friends, and her dark hair was tied back in an untidy bun. "Hi, Ryan," she greeted him. "You hungry?" "I'm about to order pizza." "Hi, Mrs. Carter. Parone, you got it." She gave a wink. I smiled back at Ryan, who gave me a look that said, "Your mom is awesome." Hot chocolate later, too. Extra marshmallows. The evening went exactly as I had imagined any sleepover would. We had a silly disagreement about which Pokemon starter was the best, ate too much pizza, and watched Home Alone for the 100th time. Just so you know, it's Squirtle. Avoid me. Mom kissed my head at 11 and said, I'm turning in, all right. Avoid staying up late. We won't. Automatically, I made a pledge. She looked at me as if she didn't trust me, but she didn't care enough to dispute it, so she vanished into her chamber. Ryan grinned. It's a Pokemon battle at midnight, of course. For a time, life felt ideal once more as we sat up in my room, as the rain outside whispered. The first thing I noticed when I woke up, I'm not sure what hour it was how cold. It's bone-deep cold, the kind that makes your teeth chatter even under blankets, not the typical winter chill. The silence was the second thing that caught my attention. There was only this oppressive silence pressing against my ears, no hum from the heater, no stream from the house settling. Ears shivering. I sat up and looked at Ryan. His face was partially buried in the fabric of his sleeping bag, and he was unconscious. I felt like I had sandpaper in my mouth. I decided to get some water and see whether the heat had been turned off. I crept out of bed and walked carefully to the door. Shadows gathered like spilled ink in the corridor, which was darker than I remembered. Everything appeared normal downstairs. The microwave's digital clock flashed 12:47. Compared to upstairs, the air was warmer and somewhat oppressive down here. After downing a glass of water, I stood there and listened for a moment. Nothing. The cold hit me hard once more when I returned upstairs. I pulled the covers up to my chin and slid under them. I heard it at that point. Slow, heavy, purposeful, breathing. The sound didn't originate from Ryan's side of the room, so at first I assumed it was him. It was from underneath me. My mind raced to come up with answers. The vent, perhaps. The vent was on the other side of the room. My imagination, perhaps. Perhaps, Ryan, I muttered. Nothing, Ryan. This time, louder. He rubbed his eyes and stirred. What? I shook my voice and said, Stop breathing so loudly. A pause was followed by a drowsy laugh. I'm hardly breathing, dude. You are, indeed. You have a Darth Vader-like voice. Angry, Ryan sat up. Who are you? He stopped. I will always remember the transformation in his face. A single second, he felt irritated. The next he looked down. His eyes widened, and his skin lost its hue. Holy shit, he said in a whisper. I felt sick to my stomach. What? He remained silent. He simply scooted away. He slammed into my dresser so quickly that he toppled a pile of comics. I noticed him when I gently turned. A man, an adult male, was beneath my bed. His pale, hollow face was framed by his long, oily hair as he lay on his stomach. His lips were curled into the tiniest smile, and his wide, glassy eyes were fixed on mine. His hand, however, pressed to his lips in a silent shudder, was what stopped my blood in its tracks. I was immobile for a moment. I was out of breath. What my eyes were witnessing was too much for my brain to grasp. Then, with a mild, almost gentle tone, he addressed Software. I know your mom, he said in a low voice. His words didn't fit his features. I'm just here to see her. It was too steady, too soft, like if he'd rehearsed using those words. Something inside of me exploded when he began to crawl out. Hey Ryan, I cried out, my voice shattering. Ryan had already started to move, stumbling over sleeping bags and one another. We ran for the door. Behind us the scrape of wood and the rustle of sheets came, socks slipping on hardwood. We ran down the hall and collided with the police sirens, the hammering fists, the door lock, the open door, and Mom's room, the bag they discovered, the letter inside, the window in the spare room. I failed to notice, the not until many years later, organizing Mom's belongings. 5 shaky block words letters. I'll be back, tell him,